Welcome, everyone. The major point that I want to make is that the human resource frame is focused on people in the organization. This frame draws upon the field of social psychology and is based on the premise that organizations are inhabited by individuals who have needs, feelings, and dispositions, as well as possess the capacity to learn and defend established attitudes and beliefs, particularly their ways of doing work. It highlights the relationship between people and organizations, and it advances a simplistic yet important principle of effective leadership articulated by Chester Barnard in 1938. Chester Barnard was a past president of AT&T, and he noted that the key to successful organizations is to meet the needs of workers while getting the job done. The human resource perspective provides an additional and important dimension to understanding organizations and the nature of leadership. As we know, the structuralist frame focuses on what is good for the organization and emphasizes hierarchical structures and efficiency that not only alienated workers, but also wasted human talent. On the other hand, the human resource frame views people as the primary source of productivity in organizations. Bowman and Deal note that when managers attend to the needs of workers, respect them, presume that they will act responsibly, and provide reasonable autonomy and develop their abilities, they will help achieve the organization's goals. When this happens, organizations can be energizing, productive, and rewarding places to work, and help make the organization profitable, or in the case of schools, help all students learn at high levels. Bowman and Deal outline 4 assumptions of the human resource frame, including 1. Organizations exist to serve human needs. 2. Organizations and people need one another. Organizations need ideas, energy, and talent, and people need careers, salaries, and work opportunities. 3. When the fit between the individual and the organization is poor, one or both suffer. 4. A good fit between individuals and organizations benefit both. In the best sense, human beings find meaningful and satisfying work, and organizations get the human talent and energy they need to be successful. This perspective had its beginnings with research studies conducted at the Western Electric plant during the 1920s and 1930s. As scientific management was applied to industry, there was a need to understand the human factors on production efficiency. The work of Mary Parker Follett and Elton Mayo was rooted in classical theory, and their studies focused on discovering how work environments may be altered to increase workers' productivity. Their findings, however, contributed to spanning the gap between scientific management and early industrial psychologists who challenged rigid structuralist views and the concept of unrestrained corporate action. Elton Mayo's work at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company between 1924 and 1934 focused on determining if the level of illumination influenced worker productivity as suggested by Frederick Taylor. In fact, they lowered the lighting to a level where workers could hardly see, yet production increased. Importantly, he found that there was no relationship between the two, and he observed that there was a relationship between psychological factors and production. To give you a sense of the scale of the Western Electric plant and workers in the bank wiring room, I've included several archival photographs. The first is a picture of the Hawthorne works of the Western Electric Company in 1929. And the second one shows relay assemblers in the bank wiring room in 1927. You'll notice that they're all women. The bank wiring room study was conducted by Elton Mayo as a follow-up to test his findings on illumination. It should be noted that all of the workers in the telephone relay assembly room were women, a fact that was reported much later by feminist scholars, including Carol Gilligan in the 1970s. He used rest breaks, special lunch breaks, shorter work days and weeks, and kept records on productivity for a year. His findings included that 1. Production increased all year. 2. After the original work conditions were restored, production rose and remained high. 3. He found that informal social groups determined productivity, not just physical conditions, as was assumed by classical theorists like Frederick Taylor. He found that workers thought that participating in experiments was motivating or fun. When they worked at their own pace, it removed anxiety over production levels. Workers were motivated when they participated in projected changes. Over the experimental period, the group became more cohesive and mature, and affiliation, competence, and achievement were important needs of workers. In retrospect, it's important to note that when women workers in the bank wiring room were empowered to participate in making decisions that were important to them and their work, and they were treated with dignity and respect, they gained ownership of how their work was performed. Elton Mayo and his colleagues reported that these experiences transformed the group into a much more effective team that increased productivity over time. The Hawthorne effect was a term coined to explain this phenomenon. Mayo found that productivity did not depend on physical conditions or group placement, but that it resulted from the fact that under participatory leadership, groups of workers themselves developed cohesiveness and higher morale and shared values that were highly motivating. Based on Elton Mayo's work, several new concepts for administrators emerged, including morale, group dynamics, democratic supervision, personal relations, and behavioral concepts of motivation. Mary Parker Follett's research provided a rationale for the human relations or resource movement and helped lay the foundation for viewing organizations as social institutions, thinking about management as a social process that is situational and context-bound, and that authority didn't flow from the top of the hierarchy down to the bottom, but was influenced by the situation and people at multiple levels in the organization. Studies by Elton Mayo and Mary Parker Follett were followed by others. Some researchers and their emerging concepts include Kurt Lewin, who studied group decision-making and laid the foundation for contemporary organizational development, including PD and capacity building. Helen Jennings found that dominant, aggressive people were not perceived as leaders and are likely to be rejected and isolated by the group. Benjamin Woolman found that groups elected leaders who were perceived to have the ability or power to accomplish the task and were willing to accept responsibility. This is in contrast to the classical theorist notion that great people were born to leadership. Robert Bales studied group member interaction patterns and reported that successful groups had someone who played two key roles, including task accomplishment and maintaining human relations. As a consequence of these and other findings, corporate managers began to emphasize to a much greater extent human relations concepts such as morale, group cohesiveness, and the dynamics of informal organizations. In addition, pre-World War II research set the stage for a major shift in administrative thought, practice, and research, and launched what has become known as the organizational behavior movement. The organizational behavior movement roughly spanned the years between 1950 and 1975 and focused on understanding people in organizations. We have learned that the structural frame, classical theorists, stressed formal organizations, rationality, hierarchical decision-making, and efficiency. The human resource frame, on the other hand, underscores the role of people in the organization and their contributions to its success. The organizational behavior or theory movement expanded our understanding of the relationships between the formal and informal aspects of organizations and explored the nature and direction of leadership. Here are some examples. Chester Barnard wrote The Functions of the Executive that was published in 1938. He selected and integrated concepts from many schools of thought to illuminate the relationship between the formal and informal organization, and broke new ground in arguing that managers can't focus exclusively on the formal organization, but needed to attend to the needs and aspirations of workers to be effective. Lewin, Lippitt, and White in 1939 studied personal characteristics, interpersonal behavior, and leadership styles. They identified several, including the autocratic leadership style. This style created conflict, dependency, apathy, and rebellious hostility. The democratic leadership style was preferred by workers and contributed to positive group climate. And on the other hand, laissez-faire leadership style engendered aimlessness and confusion among workers. Roethlingsberger and Dixon examined the interaction between formal organization and informal groups and social relationships. Herbert Simon, who wrote one of the most influential books of his time, Administrative Behavior, published in 1939, foreshadowed a new emphasis in administration on the importance of human behavior in decision-making processes. He later won the Nobel Prize for integrating concepts of human behavior and economics. In sum, leadership was viewed as behavior, and experimental scientific methods were used to measure and operationalize it. During the 1950s to the 1970s, researchers examined and developed theories of motivation and leadership that increased organizational effectiveness. I'd like to have you review some of these ideas, including comparing and contrasting the strengths and weaknesses of the structural and human resource frames. Then I'd like you to apply what you know. How do you use the idea of social groups to understand your organization and how to enhance your capacity to lead? Most importantly, use your knowledge in problem solving. According to Bowman and Deal, global competition, turbulence, and rapid change have heightened an enduring organizational dilemma. Is it better to be lean and mean or to invest in people? A variety of strategies to reduce the workforce, downsizing, outsourcing, use of temporary and part-time workers, have been widely applied to reduce costs and increase flexibility. What are the real costs of these structuralist strategies, and what alternatives would you propose that may improve the long-term success of your organization?